Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unwrap a seriously fascinating archaeological puzzle. It's one that connects two ancient worlds you'd never think to put together, the deserts of Egypt and the green hills of ancient Italy. It's this wild story about a case of mistaken identity that by pure chance ended up being one of history's most important linguistic treasures.
Okay, let's dive right in. This is the big one, the central question that had historians scratching their heads for decades. How in the world does a lost text from Europe get used as the wrapping for an Egyptian mummy? I mean, how does something like that even happen?
So at the center of this whole thing is, you guessed it, an Egyptian mummy. And for all intents and purposes, it looked pretty standard, like thousands of others from that time. But its linen wrappings were covered in this mysterious writing that was definitely 100% not Egyptian.
And that's the puzzle, right? That's what kicks this whole mystery off. The mummy itself? Totally normal, prepared in the traditional Egyptian way. But the text scribbled all over its bandages was a complete enigma. The embalmers, the priests, nobody in Egypt at the time would have had a clue what this said. So what was it?
Okay, so how did this mummy even make the jump from an ancient tomb to a modern museum? Well, its journey is almost as weird as the text itself. Let's trace this very unusual path.
So the modern part of our story kicks off in 1848. You've got to picture it. Europe is going absolutely nuts for all things Egyptian. This Croatian official, Mihailo Baric, picks it up in Alexandria, probably just as a cool souvenir to show his friends. When he dies, his brother inherits it and is, let's just say, not super into having a mummy in the house. So he donates it to an institute in Zagreb. And there it sits, this oddity, until 1891 when someone finally realizes, hey, maybe we should get an expert to look at these weird bandages.
I mean, can you even imagine that? Before it was this priceless historical artifact, it was literally living room decor. Baric had it standing right there in his parlor, and he even unwrapped the linen strips and put them in their own little display case, with absolutely no idea of the incredible secret they were hiding.
Right, so when scholars finally get to look at these linen strips, you'd think things would get clearer. Nope, they got even more confusing. They knew it wasn't Egyptian, but what it was, total mystery. The first few guesses were way off.
Okay, this is the big reveal, the moment the code got cracked. At first, people were throwing out all sorts of guesses. Maybe it was some weird kind of hieroglyphics, or maybe an Arabic version of the Book of the Dead. But then, in 1891, an expert finally figured it out. Bam! It was Etruscan, the language of a sophisticated pre-Roman civilization from Italy.
So, who exactly were the Etruscans? Well, they were this really powerful and wealthy culture in ancient Italy, mostly in the area we now call Tuscany. They were incredible traders, sailing all over the Mediterranean, dealing with the Greeks and even the Egyptians. But here's the thing. Their language is mostly a total mystery to us. We've never found anything like a Rosetta Stone for Etruscan, which is why finding this text was so unbelievably important.
Okay, so now we know the what. It's Etruscan. But that just blows the doors open on two even bigger questions. Who was this woman wrapped up in it? And how did a sacred book from Italy end up in her Egyptian tomb?
So, believe it or not, we actually know who this woman was, and it's all thanks to a totally separate papyrus scroll found with her, this one written in Egyptian. Her name was Nessie Hensu. She lived in Thebes and was the wife of a divine tailor, who was probably a craftsman making ceremonial clothes for the temples. So, just a regular Egyptian woman, not a queen or anything like that.
And here's the kicker. Here's the really crucial part. There's pretty much zero evidence that Nessie Hensu had anything to do with this Etruscan text. In fact, that papyrus scroll identifying her, it seems to be about 100 years newer than the mummy. The text and the woman were, in all likelihood, complete strangers.
Which brings us right back to that million-dollar question. If she wasn't Etruscan, how does a sacred book, maybe from a temple in Italy, end up as the burial wrapping for some random woman in Egypt? Well, scholars have a few pretty compelling ideas.
Well, the explanations basically boil down to three main possibilities. Was it just a simple case of recycling? Did an Etruscan family move to Egypt? Or was it just one of those weird, historical coincidences that happens in a big, multicultural city?
All right, theory number one, and this is the one most experts lean towards, is random reuse. The idea is that this linen book was traded or carried to the huge port city of Alexandria. Once it was there, it lost its sacred meaning and was just sold off as scrap cloth to embalmers, who probably used whatever they could get their hands on. Theory 2 suggests Nisihensu was Etruscan, but that's shot down by the papyrus that clearly says she's Egyptian. And the third theory? It's really just a spin on the first one, highlighting that in a melting pot like Alexandria, foreign stuff was getting tossed out and reused all the time.
So, look, besides being an amazing historical whodunit, why does this one artifact matter so much? Why is it so incredibly important? It's because of what's written on it. This accidental preservation gave us a gift we never could have imagined.
Okay, get this. The linen strips have about 1,330 words written on them. Now that might not sound like a ton.
But for a language we know so little about, it's an absolute treasure trove. And that right there is why this is such a huge deal. By a long shot, it is the longest, most complete Etruscan text ever found. Before this, all we had were tiny little tomb inscriptions. This was like finding a whole chapter from a book we thought was lost forever.
So what's it actually about? Well, it turns out it's basically a religious calendar. It lays out all these rituals, prayers, and offerings for different times of the year. It even names some of their gods, like Nethans, their god of water, and Usil, their sun god. It's a real window into the spiritual life of this lost civilization.
When you really think about it, the Zagreb mummy is so much more than just a mummy. It's this powerful symbol of how connected the ancient world was, sometimes in these really surprising, totally random ways. It just goes to show how ideas and objects can travel and survive by nothing more than pure, dumb luck.
And that just leaves you with one last, kind of mind-blowing thought. This priceless text sat around for decades, first in some guy's living room, and then in a museum, completely misidentified. You have to wonder, right? What other incredible secrets are just sitting there, in our museums, hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to look a little closer?